Hello, my name is Giacomo Rambaldi. I work for the Technical Center for Agricultural and Rural Cooperation, which is based in the Netherlands. Our institution works in Sub-Saharan Africa, the Pacific, and the Caribbean. My presentation focuses on drone regulations, specifically based on our experience mainly in Africa. At the very beginning, one should understand the terminology which is used when talking about drones. Other terms commonly used are unmanned aerial vehicle, or in short, UAV. When you hear the acronym UAS, that's the Unmanned Aerial System, okay, which is the largest system, including the aircraft, the mounted sensors. There may be more than one sensor, the ground control station operated by the pilot, and the software, either computer-based or cloud-based, which is used to analyze the data which has been gathered using the various sensors. RPAS, standing for Remotely Piloted Aircraft System, is an acronym which is widely used by the regulators, by international organizations. When it comes to regulations, to drone governance, one has to understand the various parts which are involved. And we have a pilot who has a control station, and we have different types of crafts, winged crafts, copters, or VTOL, which are a blend between copters and winged drones. They can take off vertically and then have wings to travel longer distances and have a longer autonomy. Let's look at the key players involved in defining the drone governance. The first one to mention is ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization. ICAO is a specialized agency of the United Nations. It codifies the principles and techniques of international air navigation and fosters the planning and development of international air transport to ensure safe and orderly growth. Drones are a new component of the aviation system, one which ICAO, its member states, international organizations, and the industry are working to understand, define, and ultimately integrate into a non-segregated airspace. The goal of ICAO in addressing drones is to provide an international regulatory framework through standards and recommended practices, procedures, and guidance material, keeping in mind that introducing drones into a non-segregated airspace should in no way increase safety risks to manned aircraft. ICAO has regional offices, and for what concerns Africa, there are the Eastern and Southern African office and the Western and Central Africa offices. ICAO organizes continental and regional workshops for remotely piloted aircraft systems to share knowledge and experiences on drone governance and to facilitate harmonization of regulatory environments. And this is very important because there is a drive now to develop national regulation, and it is extremely important that common rules in developing these common rules and common goals are sections. A continent-wide workshop took place in July in Nigeria, and 2 additional RPAS workshops are going to take place in Kenya in October this year and in Kigali in November this year. When it comes to Europe, the European Aviation Safety Agency is responsible for what happens in the airspace, in the European airspace. The mission of EASA is to ensure the highest common level of safety protection for European citizens. It ensures single regulatory and certification processes among EU member states. It facilitates the internal aviation single market and works with other international aviation organizations and regulators. Its tasks are to draft implementing rules in all fields pertinent to the EASA mission, certify and approve products and organizations, like in the case of airworthiness, provide oversight and support to member states, promote the use of European and worldwide standards, and cooperate with international actors in order to achieve the highest safety level for EU citizens globally. It is worth remembering that in 2005, EASA launched a new concept for operations for drones, essentially based on a calculation of risk. It's called a risk-based approach to regulation of unmanned aircraft. And this has evolved. There are ongoing consultations with the public, with the member states, and I will talk about that a little bit later in the presentation. When it comes to national airspace, the national civil aviation authorities are responsible for the governance of the airspace, and they are the ones which develop and enforce regulations which concerns both manned and unmanned aircrafts. You have many, and in Africa, we can see on this map the status of regulations in various countries. In July 2015, South Africa was the first country on the continent to implement and enforce a comprehensive set of legally binding rules governing the use of drones. As of today, and based on the information available on the website droneregulations.info, which is a common effort, a Wikipedia type repository where regulations are updated by volunteers around the globe. A total of 15 African countries published their drone regulations. These represent 26% of the total number of countries on the continent. 7 countries updated their aviation regulations, including minor references to drones. So, drone regulation in developing countries, especially in Africa, can create an enabling or disabling environment for the drone industry to develop, specifically for industries like the advisory industry in the agricultural sector. And small drones are unmistakably different from aircrafts in many ways, but they are considered almost as full-fledged aircraft in most of the countries, and this influences the complexity of regulating the sector. Let's look at quickly what has happened so far in Africa. For example, Uganda has no regulations in place, and drones are confiscated from travelers at the airport in Entebbe when they arrive. Now, one of our partner organizations was able to obtain a permit to fly a drone, but it took them 5 months to get this permit. South Africa, where the regulations are effective since July 2015, only 14 companies are licensed to operate so far, and there is a backlog of several hundred applications. I understand that the procedures and the steps needed to get to become a licensed operator are extremely cumbersome and very, very expensive. The Kenya Civil Aviation Authority announced its drone regulations in February 2017, but the enactment is pending. In June, at the Nairobi workshop, somebody from the authority said that 5,000 drones are holed up at the Nairobi airport, just to give an idea. In Rwanda, the regulations were put in place in 2016, in May 2016, and so far there is only one licensed operator. In Ghana, regulations were put in place in June 2016. Commercial operators need to obtain written permission from regional and local police stations before operating drones. Apparently, the process is simple. Also, the fines are very high and serious if somebody is caught flying a drone commercially without permit. In Nigeria, the regulations were actually the government banned the unlicensed use of drones in May 2016, and then started working on guidelines for interested operators, and the first one was licensed in June this year, 2017. Just to give you a comparison, because fundamentally the drone issue, okay, started a little bit earlier in the north, but in the United Kingdom, as of July 17, 2017, there were 3,046 approved small drone operators, and within their classification system, these are people operating drones of less than 20 kilo. In Spain, the regulations were effective since October 2014. There are 2,200 registered drones operators as of the 31st of May 2016, and there are also 200 organizations which offer training, which is something which is very, very, very scarce in the African continent. From what I understand, there are only a few licensed training operators, drone training operators, based in South Africa on the whole continent. So what are the challenges, and why are regulations so important? Fundamentally, the big challenges are safety, privacy, and security, and there is a consideration to be done that the technology develops faster than the legislation. UAV poses two kinds of safety risks. On the ground, for people and critical infrastructure, so if a drone falls on people, can injure people, and in the air, because it could cause mid-air collision with manned aircrafts. The influx of drones in today's crowded airspace is expected to place demands on the national air traffic control systems, which are already facing challenges in integrating an anticipated increase in traditional manned flights over the next 20 years. The other issue is privacy. The feeling to have an eye looking into your garden through your windows makes people extremely uncomfortable. Regulators are really wrestling with how to deal with the drone capacity to observe private property and capture sensitive personal information. Of course, security, there are some accounts of people smuggling drugs, phones, arms into prisons using drones. So also possibilities that terrorists may use drones to deliver explosives and so on. So these are the main challenges which regulators are facing. I would like to talk about what is happening in the north, in Europe, because there is, and also this is something which is also supported by regional agencies like EASA in Europe, working towards a risk-based approach, which is much more flexible. Now, first of all, what is critical is the takeoff mass of the system, okay? And on the top right, you can see a drone which is produced by Yamaha, and it's used to spray crops, widely used in Japan, increasingly in other countries. This drone weighs definitely more than 25 kilos. It's in the range of 140 kilos. You can see images of other drones. On the left, you have one drone which is less than 250 grams, because this is the category which is considered as a toy, and doesn't need, can be sold freely and can be used freely so far. Okay, and then there are the different types of drones which have each one its own takeoff mass. The takeoff mass is the drone plus its equipment or cargo. Now, the risk which is involved in any drone operation is determined by the takeoff mass, by the mission profile, meaning the flying altitude, for example, or whether the drone will fly in zone with high or low airspace density, and the mission profile, meaning what is the drone supposed to do? Is it going to fly close to people, on the top of gathering of people, close to critical infrastructure, above critical infrastructure, and so on. So all these are elements which define the risk. And the rules should be proportionate to the risk of the particular type of operation, and mitigation factors must be applied to reduce the risk to a level deemed acceptable. Within this approach in Europe, they defined, and this is a work in progress, there is nothing which is yet considered as final, and but they define three categories: an open category, a specific category, and a certified category. The open category, where there is low risk, fundamentally it's a situation where no authorization is required before conducting the operation, and the manufacturer is responsible for making sure that all security is in place on the drone itself, so that it can prevent the use of the drone in, for example, no-fly areas. The specific category is a medium risk category. It requires the authorization by the competent authority before operation takes place, and takes into account the mitigation measures identified in an operational risk assessment. Within the open category, the takeoff mass should be below 25 kilos. The maximum height at which the drone would fly is 120 meters or 50 meters above a higher obstacle. The drone should be always in the sight of the operator. The operator must see the drone. Flying over groupings of people is forbidden. If one of these criteria is not met, the operation is classified as specific. Now, the certified category requires the certification of the drone. The pilot must be licensed, and the operator, which is the pilot, the organization for which the pilot works, should be approved by the competent authority. And examples are flying large drones, operating continuously over crowds. An example would be, for example, media outlets using drones to document demonstrations. Large drones operating beyond the visual line of sight in high-density airspace. I will explain in the next slide what beyond visual line of sight means. And drones used to transport dangerous goods, which may result in high risk for third parties in event of crashes. Within the open category, the proposal is to establish 4 categories from A0 to A3, and the various parameters include the security and data protection, and in this particular case, geofencing. Geofencing is a system which is fed by a database into the navigation system of the drone, and tells the drone and the operator if he or she can fly the drone, what kind of restrictions are in that particular area. Other elements are the registration of operators and identification. So fundamentally, each drone would be having its own identification and would be known to the authority. Other variables are the pilot competence, a minimum age, which is set, there is a proposal to put it at 14 years for lower categories. And the also the qualification of the training service providers. And then you have operational limitations, which are the maximum horizontal distance, the maximum altitude, and the minimum distance from people. When it comes to technical requirements, again, what is influencing the whether an operation pertains to category 0, A0, or A1, A2, A3 is the maximum takeoff mass, the speed, the altitude, the horizontal distance, the existence of auto-return home options for the drone, injury criteria, what kind of level, what kind of injuries a drone falling from the sky could cause to people or assets. And also noise level is also one of the parameters which is important. Now, these are the two concepts. Important visual line of sight. The operator, the pilot, always sees the drone. Beyond visual line of sight, the drone, after a while, it disappears from the view of the operator. And in this case, the pilot, the operator, has to have high qualification. The drone has to be programmed to navigate and to come back. So also the aircraft has to have quite advanced navigation system. Here we can see some very interesting examples of maps which are updated by relevant government authorities. This is a map from the Netherlands, the Ministry of Infrastructure and Environment, and this is a no-fly zone map, okay, where different areas, and you can zoom in into this map and you can see the restrictions which exist and why the restrictions are there, and provides you very clear indications on where you can fly and where you cannot fly. This is a map for South Africa, and this map has been done by one person, so there is no official map as far as I know, but here again you see that the effort of one person in putting all this together is laudable and can help decision making in where to fly. This is equivalent map for France, and this is a more articulated map which shows where it is possible to fly or not. I just want to provide some insights in what kind of restrictions may be in place within a respective country. Now, I just took the example of Germany as it is now in 2017. There are restrictions to fly beyond 100 meters above the ground level. There are restrictions to fly within a radius of 100 meters of gathering of peoples, of scene of accidents or catastrophes. And one has to have a special permission to fly over sensitive facilities, otherwise it is forbidden. And it is worth to know what kind of facilities are generally restricted. Correctional, which means prisons or military facility, constitutional facilities, diplomatic, consular representation or international organization, police stations or other security authority, industrial energy production facilities, facilities handling categories of biological substances, and then motorways, highways, waterways, and railroad facilities, hospitals, all what is critical infrastructure within a country. Okay, what are the challenges? The challenges posed by regulatory environment on the adoption of drone technology for commercial purposes include the absence of regulations in many developing countries, the presence of disabling regulations for would-be drone operators, too expensive, too complex to obtain, heavy bureaucracy, and high costs. Lack of licensed drone pilot schools in developing countries. In Africa, as I said, to the best of my knowledge, there are only schools in licensed schools in South Africa. Another hindrance which is now affecting, I think, the entire world is that so far pilot licenses issued in one country are not recognized in another country. So that's a big problem, because somebody who has a pilot license issued in France needs to go through quite heavy bureaucracy to obtain a permit to fly in Italy, for example. Now, I would like to conclude with the recommendations for those who are flying drones. Okay, remember that drones weighing more than 250 grams are not a toy. Okay, they are a vehicle, and like all vehicles, needs to be used carefully and carefully and with deep responsibility. One has to, if regulations are there, comply with the regulations. If the drone has geofencing software, make sure that the software is always, the database is always updated. Normally it is a push from the manufacturer, which whenever you update the firmware, it will also update the geofencing database. If the no-fly zone maps are available, consult them, print them, put them in your pocket. Plan and inform competent authorities about your flight plans. This is very important for commercial operators. And also when you work in rural areas, in remote areas, inform people living and working in there about the purpose of the flight. Ask their permission to fly if you are taking images of their farms. And when it comes to regulators, the recommendation is to build a supportive framework for drone governance that does not shut down the adoption of the technology, and possibly to promote early adoption of drone technology in priority areas like agriculture and humanitarian response. Some food for thoughts for regulators. Should drone regulations stifle the uptake and deployment of a disruptive and game-changing technology so close to the heart of young entrepreneurs in developing countries? We all know that these technologies attract the youth, men and women. And we all know that there is a difficulty in attracting the youth to work in rural areas. Now, these kind of technologies are exciting, are innovative, and definitely represent opportunities for the youth to set up enterprises, to set up new ventures, and to keep them involved in rural areas. Now, regulations play a key role in all that. They can facilitate the process like that, or they can kill it. So the message for drone regulators: don't ignore that. Important is safety, important is privacy, but also employment is key today. I hope this presentation has been helpful to you, and I look forward to entertain questions. Best regards to everybody.